My alien roommate saw me naked, and she licked her lips instead of looking away in the narrow street behind the market. People passed her every day and pretended she was not there. Some covered their noses. Some whispered words that cut deeper than hunger. Others laughed and said she was too dirty to touch, too broken to care about. Over time, those words settled inside her like truth. She stopped looking up. She stopped asking for help. She stopped believing she deserved it. Her clothes were worn thin and stained from sleeping outside. Her hair was tangled, her skin dark with layers of dust and neglect. It was not that she did not want to be clean. Water cost money. Soap cost money. Safety cost more than she had ever owned. So she stayed the way she was and told herself it did not matter. Then one evening, as the sun dipped low and the market closed, someone stopped in front of her. He did not shout. He did not wrinkle his face. He simply stood there holding a small bag of food and asked a simple question. "Are you hungry?" She did not answer at first. People had asked questions before. They always ended badly. She waited for the joke, the insult, the demand. None came. He knelt instead, placing the food on the ground between them. "You don't have to talk," he said. "Just eat if you want." Hunger won. She reached for the food with shaking hands, ready to pull back if he laughed. He did not. He sat quietly, giving her space, watching the street instead of her. That was the first strange thing. He came back the next day and the next. Each time he brought something small, food, a bottle of water, once a blanket. He never touched her, never asked her name, never told her what she should do. His kindness had no sharp edges, and that confused her more than cruelty ever had. On the fifth day, rain fell hard and cold. She crouched under a broken awning, soaked and shaking. When he found her, he did not hesitate. "You'll get sick out here," he said softly. "I have a place nearby just for tonight." Fear rose in her chest. A place meant rules, it meant danger, it meant owing something she could never repay. "I'm dirty," she whispered, barely louder than the rain. "They say I shouldn't be touched." He looked at her then, really looked, and his voice did not change. "You're cold," he said. "That's all I see." She followed him because the rain left her no choice. His home was small and plain, but it was warm. The air smelled like soap and clean fabric. She froze at the doorway, suddenly aware of how she must look, how she must smell. He set down his bag and spoke gently. "There's a bathroom, hot water, clean towels if you want." She stared at the door like it was a dream. "For me." "For you." The bath took a long time. At first she only stood there, water running, unsure how to begin. Then slowly, carefully, she let the warmth touch her skin. Dirt swirled down the drain, carrying days and years of shame with it. She scrubbed until her arms ached, not because he asked her to, but because she wanted to feel new. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, her hair still wet, she felt exposed in a way she had not expected. Cleanliness made her feel visible. He had left clothes folded on a chair. Simple, soft, too good for someone like her, she thought. He did not stare when she stepped into the room. He handed her a cup of warm tea instead. "You can sit," he said. They sat in silence. Not awkward, not heavy, just quiet. After a while he asked, "Do you have a name?" She hesitated. The name she had once had belonged to a different life, a life before the street. Saying it felt dangerous. He waited. "People stopped using it," she said finally. "Would you like a new one?" he asked. "Or the old one back?" Tears surprised her. No one had ever given her that choice. She told him the name she remembered. He repeated it carefully, like it mattered, like it was something precious. That was when something inside her shifted. Night came, and with it fear again. The walls were solid. The door was locked. Safety felt unfamiliar, almost painful. "There's a couch," he said. "Or the bed. I can take the floor." Her heart raced. "The bed?" she asked. "It's just a place to sleep," he replied calmly. "Nothing more." She searched his face for lies and found none. Exhaustion weighed her down. For the first time in a long while she allowed herself to rest. The bed was warm, clean, real. She lay on the edge, stiff and unsure, expecting to be told she was doing something wrong. but no one spoke. No one pulled, no one demanded. Sleep came slowly, then all at once. In the dark, she realized something terrifying and beautiful. For the first time, she was not dirty. For the first time, she was named. For the first time, she was safe. And that was only the beginning. Morning light slipped quietly through the thin curtains. She woke up confused at first, her body tense, her breath shallow. For a moment, she thought she was back on the street, waiting for someone to shout at her or kick her awake. Then she felt the warmth beneath her, the clean sheets, the steady silence of a safe room. She sat up slowly. Nothing bad happened. The man was already awake. She could hear soft sounds from the small kitchen. A kettle, a cupboard opening. Normal sounds from a normal life she had once believed was not meant for her. She stayed still, unsure of what was expected of her now. In the past, help always ended with a demand. A look. A price she could not pay. He noticed her at the doorway and smiled, not wide, not forced. Just gentle. "You slept," he said. "That's good," she nodded. Words felt heavy. She watched him move around the kitchen, careful not to take up space. He placed a bowl of warm food on the table and stepped back. "You don't have to rush," he said, "or explain anything." That was another strange thing. He never pushed. Days passed quietly. One day turned into 3, then 5. He helped her get new clothes, simple ones that fit. He showed her how to use the washing machine, but only once, then let her try when she felt ready. He never corrected her sharply, never made her feel small for not knowing things others learned long ago. At night, she still slept on the edge of the bed, afraid of taking too much space. He slept on the other side, always leaving room between them. Not because of distance, but because of respect. She noticed everything. The way he asked before doing anything. The way he spoke to her like she mattered. The way he defended her silence instead of filling it. Slowly, she began to speak. She told him about the street. About the way people stopped seeing her as human. About the names they called her until she believed them. She told him how dirt became a shield, how looking unwanted kept her alive. He listened. He did not interrupt. He did not try to fix her story. He only said, "I'm sorry you went through that," and meant it. One afternoon, she asked him a question she had been carrying for days. "Why me?" He thought for a moment. "Because you were there," he said, "and because no one should be left alone like that." That answer stayed with her, but the world outside did not forget her so easily. When she went out with him for the first time, people stared. Clean clothes did not erase memory. Some whispered, some laughed. One woman shook her head and said, "You can't save someone like that." She felt the old fear rise, sharp and fast. Her steps slowed. She wanted to run, to disappear before she embarrassed him. He stopped walking. He turned back to the woman and said calmly, "She doesn't need saving, she needs respect." The street went quiet. For the first time in her life, someone stood beside her instead of ahead of her. That night, she cried into the pillow, not from pain, but from release. He did not ask her to explain. He simply sat close, not touching, letting her know she was not alone. Still, doubt lingered. She wondered how long this kindness could last. People like her did not get happy endings. They borrowed peace for a while, then paid for it with loss. One morning, she packed her few things. He found her standing by the door. "I'll go," she said quickly. "Before people ruin your life." He did not raise his voice. He did not block the door. Instead, he asked, "Is that what you want?" She shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "It doesn't matter what I want." "It does to me," he said. She broke then. She told him she was afraid of being chosen because being chosen meant being seen, and being seen meant being hurt. He listened. Then he said something simple. "You don't have to stay forever," he said. "Just stay today." So she did. And then she stayed the next day. Weeks passed. Her hands stopped shaking. She laughed once, surprised by the sound. She learned small routines, morning tea, evening walks, quiet talks before sleep. One night she asked if she could sleep closer, not from need but from trust. He nodded. "If you're comfortable." They lay side by side, not crossing boundaries, sharing warmth and safety. The bed was no longer a place of fear. It was a place of rest. She realized then that being given a place in his bed was never about ownership or desire. It was about belonging, about being allowed to exist without punishment. Her past did not disappear, but it stopped controlling her. The people who once called her untouchable still existed. Their voices still echoed sometimes, but now they were quieter, because she had a name again, because she had dignity again, because someone saw her as human. And this time she saw herself that way too. The story did not end with applause or miracles. It ended with something better, a quiet life, a shared space, a future built on kindness. The morning came with a pale light that filled the room in soft gold. She woke slowly, feeling the warmth of the bed and the quiet hum of life around her. For the first time, waking did not carry fear. It carried curiosity, an odd feeling that had been foreign to her for so long that she hardly knew what to do with it. He was already up, moving about quietly, as if the world itself were a fragile thing that needed careful handling. She watched him from the bed, noticing how ordinary he looked, ordinary, yet extraordinary in his patience, in the way he treated life and people with a respect she had never known. He was not loud. He did not force his opinions or judgment on anyone. But his presence commanded trust. "Good morning," he said softly, glancing at her with eyes that were both kind and steady. "Sleep well," she nodded, feeling the words heavy in her throat. Sleep had been strange lately. Sometimes dreams reminded her of the street, of the whispers and the cruel laughter. Other times, dreams were blank, empty spaces that scared her less than reality ever had. But now, waking brought calm instead of dread. He handed her a mug of tea, the warmth seeping into her hands. She sipped, enjoying the quiet ritual of sitting at a table that was hers as much as his, though she was still learning the rules of ownership in this space. Nothing was demanded of her. Nothing was forced. It was a kindness so complete that it unsettled her at first. "You can stay as long as you need," he said. "There's no rush, no schedule you have to follow unless you want one." She stared at him, startled by the simplicity of his words. No one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever given her the right to be human without attaching a cost or expectation. Days turned into weeks, each one small but significant. She learned the rhythms of his life. The mornings began with tea and quiet conversation. The afternoons were for simple chores, and evenings brought reading or sitting in silence, listening to the wind brush against the windows. She began to recognize patterns, little comforts that made the world feel predictable and safe. And safety was something she had rarely known. Her reflection in the mirror was still unfamiliar. The layers of dirt that had once defined her were gone, leaving skin that glowed faintly in the morning light, hair that could be combed without effort, clothes that fit and made her feel like a person again. Yet each time she looked, she saw traces of her past etched in the lines of her face, in the cautious tilt of her shoulders. She did not regret it. Those marks were a map of survival. He noticed the small victories she celebrated quietly. The day she learned to make the tea herself, the day she washed her own clothes without fear of spilling or making a mistake, the first time she laughed aloud at something trivial. He never pointed them out with pride, never drew attention to her progress, but his eyes reflected a quiet approval that spoke louder than words. She began to open up more about her past. Not everything at once. She knew the dangers of revealing too much too quickly, but pieces of her life fell into conversation like gentle drops into a calm pond. The streets, the people who had called her names, the nights spent huddled in corners or under stairs. She spoke of hunger and fear, of loneliness so deep it felt physical, of the small humiliations that had piled up into a mountain of shame. He listened, always listened. He did not interrupt. He did not argue. He did not try to rewrite her story. Sometimes he asked questions, simple ones that encouraged her to think or remember. Sometimes he just nodded and allowed silence to hold her words, giving them weight and dignity. And in that listening, she discovered that her life, once dismissed by everyone, mattered to someone. One day, she ventured outside with him. The city was loud and bright, a confusing mixture of colors and smells that had once overwhelmed her senses. She walked beside him, clutching a scarf around her neck, a shield against the stares and whispers that still followed her. People looked, of course. Some whispered, as they always did, some stared with judgment, and a few shook their heads in disbelief. But he held himself steady, not pulling her back, not shielding her unnecessarily, but walking with her as an equal. "Do you see?" he asked gently when she flinched at a passing comment. "They might say things, but their words cannot reach you unless you let them." It was a hard lesson, learning that the world would still speak cruelly, even when you had found safety. She stumbled at first, still used to shrinking at every sound, every glance. But slowly, she began to notice the small kindnesses as well. A vendor who smiled when she approached, a child who waved, a stranger who offered a seat on a crowded bus. They were quiet and small, but they mattered. They reminded her that not all human voices were harsh. Back at home, she sat on the couch, brushing her hair slowly, reflecting on how far she had come. She realized she had started to trust him completely. She could speak without fear of ridicule. She could laugh without thinking someone was mocking her. She could sit quietly without feeling she was a burden. And she began to feel something more profound, a sense of belonging, a recognition that she was no longer merely surviving. She was living. The first time she allowed herself to sleep without the fear of being judged or punished was transformative. The bed, once strange and imposing, had become a sanctuary. She moved closer to him, not for intimacy or desire, but for the comfort of warmth and human connection. He did not flinch. He did not ask for explanation. He merely acknowledged her presence with a nod, showing that she could exist in his space without apology or fear. One evening, she spoke about her fears, about the possibility of losing this life, this security, this trust. About the fear that kindness always came with hidden cost. He listened, as always, and then spoke in his calm, even tone. "You are not a debt to anyone," he said. "You do not owe me or anyone for your existence. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be seen." The simplicity of his words struck her. She had spent so long shrinking, so long believing she was too small, too dirty, too unworthy, that it was almost impossible to absorb the idea that she could belong. And yet, slowly, she felt it sinking in. Weeks turned into months. She began to venture further, learning to navigate the city, learning that the world was not entirely cruel, that there were places and people that would allow her to exist as she was. And through it all, he remained a constant, a quiet anchor in her life. His patience never wavered, his kindness never faltered. One day, she looked at herself in the mirror and did something she had never done before. She smiled. Not a small, hesitant smile, but a real one that reached her eyes. She touched her face, her hair, her clothes, and for the first time she recognized herself. Not as the dirty person the world had labeled her, but as someone who had endured, who had survived, and who had begun to heal. He noticed, of course. He did not comment immediately, but later, when they were sitting quietly, he said, "You look at peace." "I am learning," she replied, and meant it. The days continued in quiet rhythm. She learned that life could be simple, that joy did not need to be loud or dramatic. She learned that safety could be consistent. She learned that trust was not something fragile to be guarded at all times, but something that could grow like a small plant when nurtured carefully. Conflict arose, naturally. The world outside was still a place of judgment. Some people in the neighborhood still whispered, still judged, still assumed she would fail. Sometimes she doubted herself. Sometimes she wondered if she truly deserved this life. But each time doubt arose, he reminded her with simple gestures, an offered hand, a patient listening, a space shared without expectation, that she belonged here in this life, in this home. She began to take steps she had never thought possible. She started volunteering at a local community center, offering small acts of kindness to others who, like her, had once been dismissed or ignored. She realized that giving and receiving kindness were not separate acts, but two halves of the same whole. And through helping others, she reinforced the lessons she had learned about her own worth. Night after night, she fell asleep beside him, feeling the quiet safety that had once seemed impossible. She no longer feared the bed, no longer feared closeness, no longer feared being seen. And each morning, waking to the soft light, to the mundane beauty of life continuing peacefully around her, she felt a growing confidence that she could face the world, not as a victim, not as a shadow, but as herself. One evening she turned to him, her voice soft, careful. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." He shook his head slightly. "No thanks needed. You deserved this life all along. I only helped you see it." The words stayed with her long after she had gone to sleep. She realized that she had finally learned the most important lesson, that she was worthy of care, of trust, of safety, of warmth, simply because she existed. That the world might not always be kind, but she had found a space where kindness was real, and that was enough. For the first time, she could look forward. She could plan. She could imagine a future where she was more than her past, where she was defined not by cruelty or neglect, but by her resilience and her capacity to heal. And she understood, finally, that belonging was not a gift to be begged for. It was a right she had claimed through surviving, trusting, and learning to accept care. The bed remained a symbol, not of dependence, not of obligation, but of refuge, of acceptance, of being allowed to exist fully and completely without fear. And with that realization, she slept with a heart lighter than it had ever been, dreaming not of survival but of life. Morning came with a gentle warmth, the sun spilling softly through the curtains. She woke slowly, stretching, feeling the weight of calm around her. The fear that had once clung to her like a second skin was now a distant memory, a shadow she recognized but no longer carried. She took a deep breath and smiled, a quiet, real smile that reached her eyes. He was already up, as always, moving around with quiet purpose. She noticed the small things now, the way he arranged the tea cups, the careful way he handled the newspaper, the way he paused before speaking, as if he wanted the world to notice nothing but understanding. She felt grateful, though she rarely said it out loud. Gratitude was still new, still something she had to learn to carry without shame. Today felt different. The air was filled with light, the city outside alive but distant. She had spent months learning to navigate the world with him by her side, but now she realized that she no longer needed him as a shield. She could face people, streets, and judgment with the quiet confidence that had been born from kindness, not fear. "Good morning," he said softly, looking at her over the rim of his teacup. "Good morning," she replied. The words came easily now. They were simple, but they carried weight, weight she had never felt before. She moved to the small kitchen table and poured herself tea, holding the warm cup carefully between her hands. The ritual was comforting, a rhythm that marked the passing of ordinary days filled with extraordinary growth. She glanced at him as he prepared his breakfast and felt a wave of something she couldn't name. Respect, gratitude. Perhaps it was both, folded together like the quiet spaces they shared. It had been months since she first stepped into this home, uncertain and fearful. Months since someone had treated her with patience rather than judgment. Months since she had felt clean, safe, named. She remembered vividly the first bath, the small act that had begun her transformation. That simple act of care had rippled outward, changing everything. The bed, once foreign and intimidating, had become a sanctuary. The food, once a rare gift, had become nourishment and stability. The small gestures of listening, understanding, and respect had slowly built a foundation she had never imagined she could stand upon. She remembered the street, too, The harsh voices, the laughter that cut deep, the constant reminder that she was unwanted. That world had not disappeared. People still whispered, still pointed, still judged, but she no longer believed them. Their cruelty had shaped her, yes, but it had not defined her. She was learning to define herself, one choice, one act, one thought at a time. He noticed her reflection in the mirror that morning and smiled. "You look strong," he said. She tilted her head, unsure how to respond. Strength had been a word she associated with survival, not with living. "I'm learning," she said carefully. "Good," he replied. "Strength is not just survival. It's knowing you belong and allowing yourself to exist fully. You've done that." His words resonated. She had done that. She had taken space, claimed a name, and allowed herself to be seen. No one had told her before that she could belong. Now she knew. The day moved forward with quiet rhythm. She helped with chores, learned to organize the small space they shared, and even prepared part of the meal. Each act felt ordinary but meaningful, a way of participating in life rather than hiding from it. She discovered that the world could be ordinary and beautiful at the same time, that simple tasks could carry dignity and purpose when done without fear. Later, they went for a walk. The city buzzed around them, alive with movement and sound. She noticed the people more keenly now, not as threats but as other lives existing alongside hers. Children laughed, couples argued quietly, vendors called out their wares. She felt a strange sensation. She was part of it. She belonged in this world now, and the world, for all its chaos, did not frighten her. As they walked, a man passed by and stared at her. She felt the old prickling fear rise for a moment, then steadied herself. He passed without comment. She realized she did not need his approval or anyone else's. She had learned to walk with her head held high, to exist without fear, to claim space and dignity even when the world whispered otherwise. Returning home, they settled into the living room. She picked up a book, something light and fictional, and began reading aloud softly. He listened, occasionally nodding or smiling. It was not the first time they had shared this, but today felt different. Today, she read with confidence, her voice clear, her words unafraid. After the reading, she spoke about the past again, not the street itself, but the feelings she had carried. Shame, fear, doubt. She spoke carefully, choosing words with intention. He listened, as always, giving her the space to speak, the permission to feel, and the acknowledgement that her experiences were real and valid. "You know," she said quietly, "I never believed someone could care without asking for something back. I thought kindness always had a cost." He smiled softly. "Kindness can be a gift," he said. "Sometimes it's just given, no cost, no strings. You deserve that gift always." Tears formed in her eyes. They were not tears of sadness, but of release. Years of fear and neglect seemed to flow out, leaving something new behind. Something she had never known, peace. The evening came and they prepared for bed. She paused before stepping under the covers, reflecting on how far she had come. The bed was no longer a source of fear or hesitation. It was a place of rest, a place of belonging, a symbol of the life she had claimed for herself. She moved closer to him, not for intimacy, but for warmth, comfort, and the simple reassurance of another human presence beside her. He noticed and nodded quietly, allowing her the space without comment. The simple acknowledgement felt enough. It was a reminder that she could exist fully and safely in his world, without shame, without fear, without hiding. As she drifted to sleep, she thought of the life she had left behind, the streets, the whispers, the cruel laughter. That life was not erased, but it no longer held power over her. She had survived it, yes, but she had also grown beyond it. She had learned trust, safety, dignity, and the courage to be seen. And in that growth she found hope. She realized something profound. Belonging was not a reward. It was a right. She had claimed it through her strength, her trust, and her willingness to accept care. The world might still be harsh at times, but she had discovered a sanctuary, a life where she was seen, named, and valued. That sanctuary was not temporary. It was hers to carry forward into every day, every challenge, every quiet moment of living. The man beside her stirred as she shifted closer. He did not speak, did not move, simply shared the space with her. It was a quiet testament to trust and understanding, a proof that she could exist fully in someone else's presence without fear or shame. She drifted further into sleep, feeling the steady rhythm of life around her, the quiet hum of the heater, the soft sounds of the city beyond the windows, the occasional creak of the floorboards. It was ordinary, yes, but extraordinary in its stability and safety. For the first time, she understood that happiness could be simple. It could be calm. It could be quiet. It could exist in the space of a shared home, a warm bed, a patient companion, and a name that belonged to her alone. In her dreams, she walked through the city streets again, but this time she was not invisible. People passed her, yes, but she walked tall, unafraid, recognized by herself as much as by anyone else. She held her head high, and the shadows of her past did not touch her. She was free. Morning would come again as it always did. She would wake, stretch, sip her tea, and face the world with the quiet confidence of someone who had been lost and was now found. She had been called too dirty to touch, dismissed, ignored, and mocked. Yet now she was clean, named, and safe. She belonged in the world, in his home, in her own life. The story did not end with applause, nor with dramatic miracles. It ended with something far better, a life reclaimed, trust rebuilt, and a heart learning to rest. She had survived, yes, but she had also learned to live. She had learned to be human again, not defined by cruelty, but by care, respect, and the quiet courage to accept kindness. And in that quiet courage, she found something permanent. The knowledge that she was worthy, always had been, and finally she could live fully as herself.